to this computer. We're now recording. So let's get back. So what we came up with last week, I just listened to myself and all of us for an hour and 53 minutes before we started. And we could add to this for sure. If somebody make notes, we'll add to it somewhere. But here's the strengths that we came at, that we are fire and EMS. We do all hazards. We do whatever. Whatever people call us from, they dial 911. Along with the police, we're out and we do it. To a point, we're adaptable. And this pandemic's perfect with the PPE, the decon of the vehicles. I gave an example last week. Our fire inspector has immunosuppressed issues, and he's not able to get into the building. So what he start doing is using FaceTime with the business owners to go in and do the inspections. So we are adaptable to a point, but as we'll talk about, only to a point. And when we talk about it, I think it's going to be lack of adaptability is going to be part of our weakness part. We solve problems, and that's what we do. We're a reactive force that solves problems all the time. We have value, and we're going to talk about today, and Jonathan brought it up last week. We have value, but we don't measure our value. What is our value? We don't promote, and Nick brought up, we don't promote and market our value, and I think Mike T did also. We're always on the front lines of adversity. So that people call us when there's a bad time, when they don't know how to handle it. And that's definitely our strength, We collect data, but as we'll talk about today, when we get to weaknesses, what do we do with the data? As brought up last week, our strengths are we have respect, there's awe. I now need to add more people. And this is not easy to do when the video is already up. Sorry, hold on. I hate to interrupt, but I got to do this at times to get people on when they. Come on, computer. I'll get to it. Anyway, and it's supposed to be Sailor, SAYLORS, is we have fire economics, but not a lot of them, but we have some. Tribal dissension was supposed to be for weaknesses, but we'll get to it. We have political connections. We'll talk about how well do we use our political connections. We identify, which we're doing now. We're identifying and recognizing weaknesses. At least we're open to doing it. We're not closed to doing it. We're interested in supporting others. We do customer service, but how good do we do it, and how good do we market? We do reactive innovation, as I talked about, especially with the things that we're creating to protect us. And we have a culture, we have values. Everybody says fire and EMS are the greatest jobs in the world, and we love working in them. But it's also a reactive culture, and this is going to require us to look to the future. So, So what we want to look at today is our weaknesses. And I'm not going to go through this in detail. You all know what it is, but basically we're going to look at our lack of capabilities, our gaps and strengths, our gaps in reputation and presence and reach, time scale and deadlines and pressures that financials and cash flow is going to be big. Our continuity of service, are we doing it the way we need to do it? And I really think a big one, and we'll talk more about it under opportunities, is the effects on our core activities. A lot of people have had real negative impact on their core activities. Reliability of data, which is a key. We have a problem in general in collecting and using data. And I'll just take it at the big picture, both at NIFRS and NEMSIS. Not everybody reports. And on the police side, police report everything, and they all do it collectively. So our reporting, collecting, and how we use our data, we're not doing well. And how well does our management support cover, and are we ready for succession? So, we got to look at what are our weaknesses of keeping us sustainable. So this is where the discussion will come in, and everybody can to join in. And besides putting the notes in the notes, if you write them down, and I'll give you my email at the end, we can get it or send them to Jonathan. We can get more of where our weaknesses are. So when we get to opportunities and threats, and at the end, we can provide some recommendations and guidance of how fire and EMS can move on in the future. I'm going to read these very quickly, and we can come back to all of them in detail. But what are our values? What do we value? We're reactive, and we have a lack of future vision, in my belief. And some of you could all give that. Data analysis. What do we do with the data? How well are we at marketing and branding ourselves? Financial streams. What are our how well are our finances? And everybody's getting hit, whether it's tax-based or it's being paid for service. Lack of understanding of how and promotion of our value. A lack of coordinated. We have politics, but again, the police department, the police go to on a local level, state, and a federal level as one voice for politics. In fire and EMS, and in either just EMS or fire, we have multiple different organizations. We're not unified in that. Are we ready for the evolution of way that things are going to get done in the future? I don't think, a lot of us are reactive to, we don't want to evolve. Reduction in incidents causes both what is our value if we're not doing as much, and B, how does that impact funding? And reaction to the type of calls, reduction. Some places are reducing what type of calls are going to, so it goes to the reduction in incidents. Again, I had funding. We were looking at possible staff reductions, unexpected obstacles. This pandemic surely brought obstacles that maybe somebody knew out there, but most of us didn't know. And lack of organized customer connection. I wouldn't say service, but connection, how to interact with our customers, how to build value through that, improve customer value to customers, and our culture. While on one hand it's good, is our culture one strong enough to move us forward? Lack of introspection. Are we looking at ourselves from an internal perspective, both individually and collectively, of where we are and what our faults are, where we glossing them over? And poor data collection, data process, and it goes to the next. We don't synthesize the data. So what does that data matter? What does it mean, both in fire and EMS? And with that, I'm going to reduce this down so I can see everybody. And anybody want to raise their hand that has a question, wants to start? Somebody just put up in the chat if you want to start the conversation, and we'll let you start. Anyone?
Should I be the shy one again?
Yeah, go for it, Jonathan.
Good morning, everybody. And as an aside, just before I dig into this, I'm going to say happy birthday Beyond Lucid Technologies. 11 years today. So excited. Okay, so I think Amy made a really interesting point in this chat here, and I hope she chimes in, as Amy always has very interesting things to say. I think, and I want to give kudos to you, Tony, as part of the flip side of this, because I don't want to be a person who points out weakness and doesn't, emphasize either how we're addressing or how it can be addressed. But we talked a little bit on the last section about, in the last meeting rather, about Peter Drucker, right? The famed management guru, and the concept that you can only manage what you measure, and you can only fix what you measure. And so, just to sort of keep brief, I think Amy mentions an important point about the lexicon, the words that we use. And not just the tribalism, but do we mean different things when we use different words? For example, the number of different definitions that you get for community paramedicine, or mobile integrated health, or mobile community health paramedic, or mobile integrated paramedic, or all these different things, right? And the idea that we have so many different words in different places, in different types of organizations that sometimes mean the same thing, or sometimes you have different words, or so the same word for different things, right? So we end up sort of fighting on the
So
language.
Jonathan, I just want to hold on 1 second, and we need to make a note on that definitions is part of our weaknesses that we don't have identified. So we need.
It is, but I want to give the other side of it too, which is there is a compelling amount of talent on this call right now. And I just grabbed a screenshot of just the names of the attendees and the faces of the attendees who are on this call. And Tony, I think one of the things that you're addressing is I have often the same conversation with someone from Phoenix as I've had with someone from Cleveland, as I've had from California and from Vermont, right? And by the way, several of those folks are on this call right now, so you know who I'm talking about. And there is not a forum in our industry today for those folks to come together and cross-pollinate their ideas. So at the ONC conference, the Office of the National Coordinator and the Health Information Exchange conference that ASPR put on in January, the phrase came up, islands of success. And I think that's a word that I found myself using a lot since January, islands of success. People don't know what each other's doing. And when you go to a conference, you tend to see the same names over and over again, right? And it's not to say that they shouldn't speak, but there's a whole lot of other voices. And Tony, what I think you have done here in this informal discussion, as you mentioned, because apparently nobody's ever been on Zoom, right? Is you've created an occasion for people to come together whose voices don't tend to get heard, but are on the ground innovating in their areas. And if they could teach one another, then the wording that you're talking about, the translation, the Rosetta Stone, whatever phrase we want to use, of cross-pollinating those ideas and realizing that sometimes we're talking about the same things in different ways. And sometimes we're using the same words or we're using we mean different things by the same words. So we're confusing around that way. But if we could bring everybody together, we can start to translate. And if you can start to translate, you can start to measure, because you can realize what's the same and needs to measure it against each other and what you're actually confusing the statistics on. So you end up with apples and oranges. So you are, by this process, solving that issue. And I hope that in the next week's call, when we talk about opportunities, we go, instead of 10 to 20, 10 to 30, we end up going from 30 to 90 people, because this is exactly what needs to happen. And I can't think of another instance in the last 11 years now where I have seen so many people who don't often attend conferences to meet one another, quite literally meeting one another. So congratulations to you on helping to address the weakness. But I think the translation among the groups, and therefore the inability to lay the data that you talk about side by side, has been a compelling weakness that is solvable, and is happening now. So congratulations.
Cool. So
with that, I'll stop.
I see Joe Cascotti, isn't he, has his hand up. Joe, do you have some comments?
Yeah, thanks, Tony. I started my EMS career in '96, just north of you in Lehigh County. So I'm currently down in Houston, or just outside of Houston, Texas. So I kind of have a little bit of a different perspective, I guess, because I started with a EMS service that was non-fire based, and then now I'm working with a combined department, fire EMS. But I think you hit the nail on the head, Tony, with you mentioning about how we're reactive. And, everything that we do, if you look at everything that fire and EMS does, it's all a very reactive thing, and we're not very proactive in what we do. So that's where really this community paramedic stuff is, the stuff that's going on now with the CMS loosening up some of the guidelines, the alternate destination transport stuff, things that they were talking about in ET3. That stuff was all years down the road of becoming, a reality for everybody. And here we've all been thrust into this now, all of a sudden in the last 3 to 4 weeks. And we have a very, very good opportunity here to prove our worth in that respect. And then that also will open up some of those revenue streams as well. We just actually had an incident the other day where we had a clinic call us and said, hey, that we've been working with, and said, hey, we have a patient at home who just got out of the hospital, her sugar's like 400 something. She doesn't have a way to get here to see me, to get her insulin, to get her meds. Is there any way you guys can go over and check on her and maybe give her a ride over to the clinic? And we went and did that, saved her readmission, and now we're utilizing that example to the local hospitals and say, hey, look, this is what we're capable of doing for you because you can't do this. There's an opportunity for us to partner here and to get some funding streams going and for us to provide some out-of-hospital medical care that's trusted and that's going to be efficient and it's going to get people to the right places. The other thing that we're seeing, and of course you've all probably seen about how, where are all the STEMIs and strokes going because people aren't having heart attacks and strokes anymore, apparently, when coronavirus came around. We have a readmission reduction program with one of the hospitals specifically geared around STEMIs. And we average about 12 to 15 referrals every month for STEMIs. March, we had 3 referrals. April, we had 0. So doesn't mean that these people aren't having STEMIs anymore. It's just they're not going to the hospital. And there was a study that was done, or some data that was pulled from MedStar in the Dallas-Fort Worth area where they had, I believe, a 34% reduction in call volume and a 25% increase in cardiac arrests with a 54% increase in dead on scene or dead on arrival cardiac arrests that weren't even worked. So that's the other piece of this. That's once the coronavirus problem is solved, there's going to be a huge primary care issue. There's going to be some of these smaller doctor's offices that are just not going to be able to reopen. There's going to be a huge amount of people that aren't seeking medical care, aren't going to want to seek medical care because they're afraid of what they're going to get when they go to the hospital. And that's really where we can step in and make a difference.
I'm going to ask you another question. Just for everybody who's been putting their hand up or putting their name that they want to speak next, I got Mike, I've got Amy, and one other gentleman. I'll get back up there. So I know one of the things that Joe, what I like, and you've been in the reactive Northeast, and you're probably a little bit more progressive, down in Houston now. What are the challenges? Because you're doing some progressive stuff. What do you see as the challenges to us collectively getting some of these innovative programs in? And I think more people will speak to that also.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of the stuff that Jonathan's brought up and that you brought up. The Islands of Success thing. We're very notoriously territorial as a fire and EMS culture. Even in our area, I mean, we have patients that we could see in a neighboring department who doesn't have the program that we have. And it's not like we're going in there and taking their business. It's just following up with these people to make sure these people are getting appropriate medical care after they get discharged from the hospital. And I've had a fire chief next door say, no, we don't want you coming into our area at all. Luckily our chief has said, just go and do it and I'll deal with it. But, and it's that
jealousy. You call that jealousy or fear?
I don't really know what it is. I mean, I guess there's a couple of different things. There could be, because I don't think it's a jealousy thing, because if it was a jealousy thing, they would be actively trying to do what we're doing, and they're not. I think it's more of it's a culture and it's a mindset, and, trying to get some of these people to change the way that they're thinking about things and evolving into the new normal of what we're going to be doing with fire and EMS, or what we're capable of doing. Because for so many years we've been told you can only do this. And, now we're starting to prove our worth in other areas, and it's just trying to get that message across.
Cool. And I'm if you guys see me turning to the side, I got my iPad over your notes, and Nick, cause you're my buddy and I know you're a better typer than me, help keep up on some of these notes too. Next, we had Mike had some stuff to talk about communication. Mike, you're
Tony,
up.
I'm also grabbing transcripts of the chat. FYI.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, guys.
Go ahead, Mike.
So Jonathan and you, Tony, were talking about a lexicon and the way that we don't communicate well across disciplines. And when you look at solving these ridiculously complex sets of problems, one of the foundations in moving towards solutions is having the dialogue that starts to quantify and contain the problems in language from the various perspectives so that we all know what we're talking about when we talk. And that's not very easy because there's regional differences, there's discipline differences. And I'm going to add to our weaknesses is that everybody here is us. We don't have good understanding of outside perspectives from other massive stakeholders. What do the hospitals think? What do the doctors think? What's the legal side think? What does your community think? And do they understand anything about us? Politicians clearly don't. Going to EMS on the Hill Day, we're going to Harrisburg here in Pennsylvania. Politicians don't know jack about who we are and what we do. They think they do. And that goes to our marketing and our branding. A lot of that is a consequence of the fragmentation and conflict that we see. So some of the conflict can be mitigated by a better understanding of when we're talking to each other, what exactly it is we're talking about. One of the things I'd also like to add is I'm a paramedic in a fire department. I am not a fireman. I've been in the Philadelphia Fire Department for over 31 years, and I worked in hospital-based and third service volunteer hybrid system before that for quite a few years. And there's a real problem when we conflate the ideas that fire and EMS are the same thing. Somebody mentioned, maybe it was Amy, but there's a lot of EMS that's not provided by fire. And there's a lot of times when fire wants to hold the EMS mission subordinate to the suppression mission. I'm not exactly sure why that is, but it may be related to money, it may be related to power, it may be related to all kinds of things. But some of the things we need to think about as we move forward is how do we, once we formulate our own kind of worldview and complete this SWOT analysis, how do we bring some other perspectives in to broaden? You talked about a 30,000-foot view. There are not very many people that are actually looking at what we do from that level because of our reactionary perspective. You know, sit and play your video game or do something on your cell phone until the bells ring or the pager tones drop. So my challenge, the final thing I'd like to say is my challenge to you guys, if you got it, was to take a look at this idea of wicked problems, because we live in one giant wicked problem. Wicked problems are problems that actually can't be solved. You can only try and do things to change the circumstances to make the problems go away. Look at that article from Harvard Business Review. And when you read the characteristics that are described about what wicked problems are, and the author says if you have 3 of these characteristics, you got a wicked problem. EMS has 8 or 9 of the 10. So I throw that challenge out because if we continue to use the same methods to attempt to solve these complex interrelated systems problems as we've been using in the past without success, it's not going to make any difference. We have to do some different stuff. Now, I've been preaching this for quite some time, and I think it's really, really critical for us to look at things from a different perspective. So that's my 2 cents for the minute.
Yeah, you're right on, and I'm with you because I'm just a little bit older than you guys, but the same frustration bangs me in the head is that when we don't look to the future with a different perspective, we don't talk to our stakeholders, and the reason I included fire and EMS together is not because we necessarily provide the same service and there are overlaps, but we have links that if we can move together where we can collectively, we're going to be much more impactful than if we try to fight against each other and have separate agendas where I think, you know, there's probably 5 or 6 different objectives or goals that we can do collectively, but then there's stuff that EMS has to do on its own and fire has to be on their own. But both industries need to look at themselves in a more open vision. And we have, Mike, you don't know, but Nick's on here at LWell and a couple others that do volunteer or part-time EMS, but are in the business world. And I'm sure like I going through EFO and other programs, a lot of the examples we use were from the military or other business models. And we tend to become inverted in fire and EMS lately and only looking at internally. So you brought some great points up in under opportunities. We need to address how do we deal with these things and how do we move that stuff forward. And that's going to be the challenge. And I subject to you all that as we're collecting all of this information today, that you look at these challenges and listen to the discussions and say, okay, how do we take this forward in next week's discussion and the week after that? And then finally, how do we put that together in some kind of guidance recommendations from a broad spectrum of people who are at all different levels of fire and EMS that I think gives us some validity. And I'm sorry to cut you off. Was there anything else that you wanted to go with? Mike?
No, me? No, I'm good. I mean, I can talk all day on this stuff.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I'll pass.
you know, I kind of.
What I wanted to do is give everybody 1 to 2 minutes, and we'll just keep going as long as you guys want to go. I scheduled for an hour, but last week we went an hour and 53 minutes. If we go 2 hours, I don't care. It's up to you all about that. Amy, you're up next. So I see you have your mic off. That's my fellow Jerseyan with me, although she's above the Mason-Dixon line of Jersey. Go on, Amy.
Hi, everyone. What I had commented on in the group chat earlier when you were first talking, Tony, is kind of what Mike just addressed, that there are a variety of ways to deliver EMS, whether that's fire EMS, meaning firefighters that provide EMS and are also firefighter medics or firefighter EMTs. Like Mike mentioned in Philly, that there's a civilian side, right? So there's firefighters and there's EMS, right, within the same organization. And then there's also a variety of ways to provide standalone EMS. So when we're looking at the SWOT analysis, and you kind of clarified some of those things, Tony, those are not strengths and or weaknesses in every kind of EMS service, right? So, and some of those other things were mentioned, how legislators understand us, right? And so I think that legislators understand the fire service because of the IAFF and other very strong unions, much greater than EMS. When I go to EMS Day on the Hill, and most of the people from New Jersey that go are not fire-based because they go on the IAFF day, they are surprised that we are not aligned with the fire department. And so when they turn us to, for example, grants, they go, oh, well, there are grants. No, you have to be part of a fire service to get the fire service grants, even if you provide EMS. So I think that when we're looking at that SWOT analysis, some of the strengths and weaknesses are not applicable to everybody. And I just wanted to clarify, and you kind of just did, Tony, that we're talking about both fire EMS and EMS, and fire and EMS, to clarify what we were talking about when we were talking about this.
Sounds good. And as I said earlier, you know, there's some general areas where we all can agree, and then there's other areas where it's going to be not only just fire or EMS, but it's your individual organization or your state or your community. And at least what we're doing is spurring a thought, and you look at this list and you go, well, that's not me, but you know what, that one is me. And it gives you the ability to open your perspective and mind to it. But, you know, they're right on comments. And one of the things that I've seen being on both sides of the fence is there's places for partnership. And the funny thing is people pick on NHTSA, and by the way, people want to know why NHTSA is actually in charge, because this all started from the people who are old enough from the white paper in 1966 from highway accidents. So that's why they stuck EMS under us years ago. But at least they bring together a collection of EMS personnel from all different disciplines to talk about different documents that they create for agendas for the future. And in EMS today, one of the gentlemen actually spoke to that. So we do have opportunities in a collective for EMS and fire to do that. But yeah, I agree. You know, some of these things don't agree. And as we look at this further, we'll have to hone it down and go, yeah, everybody can agree on these. And the rest of them might be individualized to your state, your organization, or your community. And next I have, because I raised his hand earlier, was Chris Smetana. Chris? Chris?
I'm here. Sorry, I just had to get to the Zoom app and unmute.
No problem.
Guys, everybody.
Button.
Let me get my video up so you guys can kind of see who I am as well.
Sure.
So, but my name is Chris Matan. I'm with IAMED. I'm one of the co-founders and owners and CEO for IAMED. And what we do is a lot of austere and critical care training. A lot of the discussions that we do, so we do a weekly live show and where we get industry professionals from across the globe, actually. This last time we had people from Africa, Europe, Indonesia, South America, and all kind of participated in some of the clinical discussions that we're seeing. And I just wanted to kind of pass a little information on to the group. And I'm sure you guys are already kind of seeing this out there, but we're seeing a lot of disinformation going out to the line people. So a lot of people are not able to keep up with all of the changes. And so you're seeing a lot of people get a lot of these disinformation. So they're coming to the live show to basically ask questions about current treatment with COVID. What's the outcome? What's the forecast? And so we're trying to provide some of that. And to tag onto some of the conversation earlier, Sal Rezai, Dr. Rezai down in San Antonio with Rebel EM, his group is also seeing a big decrease in overall patient, but they are seeing a huge spike in increase in acuity of those patients because obviously, like you guys had mentioned, these patients are not coming in. And so you're going to probably eventually see another wave once people start feeling a lot more comfortable to come in. They're afraid by going to the hospital, they're going to contract a disease. And so they're not being sought, they're not seeking medical care. And so with that, you're seeing the death rates and the lack of, the codes increase in the San Antonio region as well, along with the Dallas-Fort Worth. One of the things that we've clearly identified, at least on our end, and where we're getting pinged from multiple agencies, is the lack of online training or good quality online training, especially in light of a lot of agencies and departments moving away and favoring online versus in person. There's multiple departments that are having crews shelter in their bunk rooms or, spacing out, but they're not doing any in-person training. They're not doing suppression training. And so there was a big lack of, I think, there's obviously a huge void of training and lack thereof and preparation leading up to this. I think we're finally seeing some of the cracks in the training and education world, at least, and seeing that we were not probably setting our line personnel up for the best success, especially in the face of a pandemic when you're dealing with a huge surge of increase of acuity in patients, not necessarily the call volumes, but the acuity and the ability to manage these patients either in a pre-hospital environment or transferring them out in a small rural area, and so I think those are some of the conversations that we need to have. And then, to tag on to John and some of the other discussions about the siloing and the sharing of information within the industry, IAMED has tried, and we've done successfully, at least within our space and our network and our niche, to bring collaborations between competitors and other training companies together to try to form a best idea, best practices, and really kind of show everybody that, you can work in the same sandbox. So we're hopefully delivering the same message. We're delivering the same quality and level of training, especially amongst some of our competitors. But at the end of the day, you also look at the inability. There's the stifling of the innovators, and I really want to kind of address that. I'm not saying that I'm an innovator, but what I am saying is I have dealt, and as I'm sure as John can attest to, we've dealt with a lot of blowback from big corporations who are already involved in some of these spaces who may not provide a higher level of training or quality of that just because of the corporate environment and mentality. And so they're really trying to go after the profiteering. The quality of the content that's put out is not high, or even sometimes not even clinically or currently relevant to the evidence-based medicine behind it. And so with that, it's just trying to find out how the little guy, such as myself, how am I able to go and play in the same sandbox with these bigger corporations? I don't have any investors. I'm bootstrapped. I can't throw millions of dollars behind something. I don't have a big name. I don't have the marketing space. So, we're easily bulldozed over by the bigger corporations and the bigger, I don't want to throw any names out. So, how do you, continue to have these innovators continue to innovate to progress our industry without having the corporate influence or being kind of suppressed? I think that is a question that I would like to get, if anybody has any food for thought, I would love to hear and share some ideas. But that's kind of where we're kind of butting up against the wall on our side, is really trying to collaborate with the bigger pictures, the bigger industry that are already key players. They have big aircraft vendors and big names behind them, but we just can't compete with them. But they're providing a subpar or even sub-level, or just shutting us out altogether. Like there's certain conferences I'm not allowed to go to. They won't even let me set up a booth because I'm considered a direct competitor. And I don't feel like that's fair, because I do feel like we bring a product or a niche that does benefit our industry. So it's just some ideas for the groups. How do we move forward? How do we get past some of these blocks, whether it be fire EMS, not wanting to mix together, whether it be corporations or different companies, how do we break down these barriers to collaborate, really? So thank you very much for the time. And if anybody has any insight or suggestions, I would love to hear some of those. But that's just some of the things that we're seeing on our side of the fence, and it's mainly related to the training and education side. So thank you.
You know what? It's awesome conversation, and they are important topics, because I feel the same way that you do. And I seen Amy, nodding her head, and a few others, is that we're being controlled by several large companies, and some I have friends in that are part of those companies, but they're looking some very stuff that they control, very specific stuff, so we can't get the message. I think what we're doing here in this forum and sharing knowledge of each other, what they do, will give us the ability to create those forums. I quite frankly told one of the biggest online providers, not live providers, online providers, a program that I actually brought to our department 8-9 years ago. Now that I'm not in charge, I told them they sucked, and they didn't have a good answer. And we need to get the fresh young minds. Now, who's not? Alan Shaw's on here, and we'll get to you in a little bit, Alan. I don't know if you still do, he had a training company. Scott McConnell's not on, but he has distance CME, and he's with a bigger company, but he's still in the same situation. But you're right, we need to get across the industry, even though you're competitors, and there's a lot of industries do this. How do we collectively that are providing this service can do best practices and get out some of the newer messages and the newer innovation? I agree with you. And we got to stop it from being stifled. So at least in this small forum of 30 people, we can start having that conversation of stop the stifling and start giving us opportunities and forums to get out there. And we're going to find out that there's room for everybody. And everybody, and I don't know if you were aware of it, I know you're on the fireside too, is Kyle Samsing from Newport News put on a quarantine fire conference about 3-4 weeks ago, all online. And we had all types of people on, and it was really a great thing. And, a lot of these guys presented at the national conferences, but there was a lot of people that didn't. And it was really refreshing. And it was 3 days. He only charged $5 a person per day, and all the money went to a charity. So it at least gave people a chance to get their names, make connections. I'm just giving you some things, but I wrote it down as one of the challenges that we'll speak to in opportunities next week. How do we do that? How do we get the innovators out? How do we get the small training companies that really have some good message and information to provide that's not getting out there? Because I see comments here about bad information coming out from a lot of places, and you brought it up. So some good stuff. I'm going to go to Nick Elwell next. Nick, you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready, as I'll ever be. First, happy Friday. Welcome, everybody. So glad that we saw the group grow. Little bit of background on me before I start talking. So I started in EMS back in 2009 as a junior explorer, all that great stuff. Moved up, worked at Lord's Health System as a lieutenant of night shift operations, and then now, more recently, I worked at Amazon as a safety compliance investigator, and now I work as a crisis and emergency response advisor. Well, that's my outward-facing title in the U.S. So I for a marketing company that does large-scale live events for big pharma and a couple of other larger organizations and some government agencies as well. So one of the big perspectives that I've seen in both being a volunteer and being in the career side is that there is not, and like Jonathan I saw in the chat put, there's not a Three Musketeers approach, right? There's one aspect that kind of stuck out to me as we were talking about that's a weakness, is that there isn't a unified front from an EMS perspective. Everybody's running in 6 different directions with different initiatives and different needs, and we're not getting the same message out there to the right people. And then I saw another comment about data points, and that we need to focus on the smaller data to get to the bigger data. And I understand that, like, perfection of your data is what's going to get an effective message out there. But the one thing I want to say is that small data the right data that we're looking at? And I don't think it is. I think response times and things are great. Like, it's good to be a goal setting thing for your industry and your station specific, metrics, so you can talk to your crews and kind of build off of that. But going forward and looking at the bigger picture, you need to look at I think, and what Jonathan had touched on last week, is we need to look at the actual health impact we're having on our patients. And similarly can, be done with your fire departments too. There are data points that you can access as a fire department, whether that's through your NIFRS reporting or, just going in and looking at your incident data as you write your incident reports and things like that. I think it's really key. But back to that big picture idea, right? So EMS, we have a few different agencies. You've got the EMS Managers Association, you've got NAEMT, and then you have your unions, which are morely fire-based, but there's EMS presence in there as well. But some of them seem to all push a different message, and I think that is where we all get jumbled up as a group, right? Because the principle of disagree and commit, which is an Amazon leadership principle that I kind of learned early on. There's many instances in life and in operations where when you look at something, you may not agree with it, you may not agree with the functionality of or how it works, but if it works and if it's efficient, even though we disagree, we should still be committing to the overall mission and the overall goal to improve. And the one thing that I do see a lot is in smaller EMS agencies, community-based EMS agencies, your local, your municipal, not majority of like your county-wide agencies, but when you look at these smaller niche kind of agencies that are fit for their town, they're more concerned about their town and their progress and their growth as opposed to growth as a whole or improving the quality of care. And that's something that plagues EMS. We really don't look at a bigger picture. We look at our business and our sustainability for our business only. And that is something that we need to start to walk away from. We need to get away from looking at just our business, just our responses, just our response times. We need to look at the overarching picture, right? When I was with my volunteer agency in Delanco, the one thing, and it's a small town, all volunteer squad, 100%, we don't charge for services, all that great stuff. And the one thing that, I made a precedent when I was the captain was I don't care about the ambulance getting to the house. I care about the patient getting the care. I don't care what ambulance and what colors it has on it. I care about the patients getting care. If I can facilitate effective care, then we've achieved our mission. Whether or not, we are getting our ambulance to them, if we're getting an ambulance to the patient in a timely manner, affecting their care and affecting their patient outcome, that is the importance. It's about the overall good. My organization is very important. My squad's very important to me. It was, and as a leader, you have to look at these things and you have to look at your organization and protect your organization and grow it. But the other thing you have to do is you have to also remember the customer and the client that you're serving. Yes, it's a business, but also it is a service that you're providing that has influence on lives. So there's things like that that you have to consider as well. And I think one of the big things is, and someone had said it before, is that we work out of silos. And the one thing that I can tell you is we 110% work out of silos in EMS. You know, we need to look at how we drive our decisions and how we move forward as a holistic view to benefit our patients and our clients, and not so much to benefit ourselves. And that's a weakness that we definitely have from an EMS perspective. I know it's a taboo conversation to have, to say, you know, like, we need to stop focusing on ourselves and focusing on the people that we serve. But it's a business principle. You know, we have to look at our customers, and our customers are our patients, and are we providing them the best service? And it's a very agnostic approach, because that's not the way that we've done it. You know, it's not the way that we've traditionally done it. It's not the way that it's ever been. But when we look at it, and we look at dynamic, you know, dispatching, and looking at the closest unit, and looking at things like that, we need to, you know, really consider, what are we doing for our patient, and what are we doing for our community? Because that is a big weakness. And I think when people start to do that and look at the overall good, one, we can push a better agenda. Two, we can have better data. And three, we can influence better change on a larger level, because we can show them the amount of influence that we have when we look at the better aspect of our businesses in, are we effective and are we aligned, and are we doing the right thing for our patients? So that's kind of my 2 cents. Big weakness, but yeah.
And I see it on fire and EMS as well. And what you pointed out, if you're a large corporation, just say Amazon, wherever you are across the country, Amazon's going to have one mission, one vision that everybody stands behind. Again, we talk about the police. They have their silos, but they still, when they come together, that's one voice that speaks. And EMS doesn't speak well together, just as EMS, neither does fire. But as again, I said, I believe fire and EMS have 4 or 5 vision points that, instead of having CFSI and then EMS stay on the hill, that you come together collectively, but you can still have your separate day. This is fire day. This is EMS day. But we're not looking at that, and we got to look at these other business models. Again, back in the 80s and 90s, it was big to look at Peters and Covey and others and Drucker and different business models. Today we're inverted, and a lot of part of it is worrying about where the finances is coming. And one of the discussions we've had a little bit, but we needed to discuss how we can get a stable funding base that both fire and EMS, because fire is going to get its butt kicked because we're primarily tax-based. Although so far I haven't heard it in too many places looking at layoffs. But Philadelphia is already talking about tax increases, cutting people, and and not in fire and EMS, but you know that all runs downhill. So it's really a big issue that we need to look at, how we can have that one voice and get at the challenge. And kind of like as Mike said from Philly, how we get out of some of these things and out of those silos is one of the challenge. How do we get out? How do we change that mindset? It's not going to come easy. Might be regional. Alan, did you have something before I turn it over to Jonathan?
I could.
Go
Can you
for
hear
it.
me? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, because I'm using a different microphone today. So, yeah, I mean, everybody, I'm basically echoing what everybody else said. I do think with funding that it is a little bit different. In EMS, you know, there was a big move a few years ago to bill. Even volunteer rescue squads. My best friend's a chief in Jersey, and his agency bills. It's a volunteer rescue squad with very small membership. Now, one of the things he brought up when I was talking to him last night is his OEM director keeps telling him, hey, get ready to get reimbursement. And he says, well, isn't that double dipping? I've already billed insurance companies or Medicare for every one of these calls I've gone on during the COVID thing. Now I'm going to turn around and say, hey, FEMA, I need to get paid back for all those calls I billed on. And you know what? I honestly don't know where that goes. In my experience in fire or fire-based first responder, I have no experience in billing. So there may be some ethical issues coming up with that. We've got a couple of issues here. Our mayor just announced that he and all his cabinet and his appointed officials, including the chiefs and assistant chiefs in fire and police, and the director of communications would be taking a 2% pay cut. Sorry, somebody just passed me in. So it's widely assumed that he's going to ask all the unions to give up 2%. So at the same time, when people can't help themselves but drop off free food at headquarters and stand outside with signs saying, "We love our first responders," the mayor's going to say, "Well, now you're taking a pay cut this year." And I understand that there's city budget issues that kick in here, but we're going to have to get in front of that in a unified message, and we don't have unified. As a matter of fact, I'm growing my COVID beard here because as a dispatcher, I've suddenly been told I can't respond to my VFD because I'm too at risk during the COVID crisis, even though we're on a fire level, we changed our protocols citywide to not go on COVID calls from the fire department. So, yeah.
Well, I was saying, I see here, and you say we're not organized how we move forward, and that's why I tried to create this with Fire and EMS. And somebody put up here, Massachusetts Managers Association has a program for laying off after COVID. They've come together to do that, and we are at that time. I would have liked to start this whole conversation about 3 or 4. Started at 4 or 5 weeks earlier. So you're right. We got to get out in front of it. And that's part of the process. And I see a lot of great discussion going back and forth, but next week we got to start coming. How are we going to create these opportunities? We see the challenges, and how are we going to create opportunities that fire and EMS can position themselves to reduce the pain? Because I believe, and I'll open it to others, that I believe the pain's coming, but I think we could reduce it. And I also think we can evolve to provide different types of services that we've never provided before, and have better data that better provides what value. And Jonathan and several others brought up last week, but I think one of the keys, we don't provide what value we truly provide to communities and communicate it. And one of my thoughts, seeing the thing about the city, we really need to do a better job collectively of getting our elected officials and our government officials to understand who we are and what our value is. But we got to do that internally first before we take it to them.
You know what? Some of our departments are great with that. My city's a hybrid or combination system, both career and volunteer. A few years ago, we had a big budget issue going on where everybody was asking for money. The volunteer chiefs walked in, not in uniform. One of them, actually, is now my chief, who was a mechanic, walked in looking like he just rolled out on the creeper from underneath the diesel truck he was working on. And the career department walked in with their chief and a whole bunch of officers as assistants. It was like a parade coming in. They were very impressive, all in Class A's. I mean, he had lieutenants and captains that he brought in for that meeting just to hold up his charts. And I'll tell you what, you want to know who won in the budget hearing that year? Yeah. The guys who put on the best show.
Boom. Yeah. And there it is.
Absolutely. I've seen it a lot. I got Jonathan next, and then whoever wants to go next. But yeah, these are all points that all connect, and most of them are on that list. And what we don't have a list, I'm added. So Jonathan, you're up.
All right, I'll try to keep brief on this, but I think it's a perfect segue from what Alan just said. So thanks for that. I think, okay, so there's kind of a digest of some of what's in this chat, and what Alan said, what Nick said. Art is talking about an experiment that I think is worth highlighting here. And so I've got a couple bullets that I summarized there that I kind of want to touch on. Again, a number of people talking about the quality of the data that's not only collected but presented. And it occurred to me, for example, even on this call, and Dave Moffat, I don't know if you're still there, if you've jumped already, but Christina. Okay, perfect. So Dave, Christina Dubois from Cypress Creek, Terrence McGregor from Los Angeles, Art, Chief Deckers, Ryan, several of the people on this discussion, and those are just the ones that I jotted down here from the discussion we've been having, are folks that I have worked with personally to look at data, to mine data, to pull data together. And I think one of the biggest challenges that we've faced is the idea that, again, for reasons that are important and they're worth not ignoring, but each municipality or each service has to report to its people, right? I mean, every company has to report to its board. It is that is an organizational reality. But when it comes to trying to compare apples to apples, or to get a sense of how we're doing relative to somebody else, or to get a sense of, is there a national benchmark? There isn't one. And they're in different places. I mean, you can look at NFPA, you can look at NEMSIS, you can sort of try to pull things together, but there isn't a very good source of truth against which you can measure yourself relative to the next guy and start to dig into what will make you better. And I think that highlights a number of different things here. So the first is, again, as there's been much talk both on mic and in the chat here, about messaging and how to message. And again, Alan, I think your point very well taken, as far as, he or she who makes the presentation most cogent and most effectively and brings the respect, gets the kudos, right? They win. But there is a rainbow of needs, and every state and every jurisdiction, and whether you're in Phoenix or in your New Jersey, the realities of response are different, right? Right now, COVID-19 is highlighting that the transmission and the population density and all the other things that are different. They need to be seen as the constellation that they are, but they don't need to be seen that way in public, right? And I think that's the part where we do ourselves a grave disservice, because again, I've marked down here, and I want to highlight, and I want to sort of call on Touchstone to talk a little bit about this if he doesn't mind me putting him on the spot. But the inside versus outside messaging, the sheer number of associations, and trying to venture a guess as to why the hell there are so many of them, because I still don't get it. I've only been here for 11 years, and I still don't understand why the organizations, for example, we have an education association, we have EMS education associations and fire education associations, and in some states you have more than one. We have a management group, we have a lobbying group, we have all these different subgroups, we have different unions and management and all that stuff. And why are they not subgroups of a larger, broader organization, right? There's no reason that they have to have homogenous messages. There are clearly different interests there, and different people based on their expertise and their personalities will gravitate to different places. But once it leaves that inside safe space, it should be unified. And I think the example that we talked about last week, and I know Tony resonated with this, was the military conversation, right? Air Force and Army make fun of each other constantly. Navy and Marines go at each other all the time, but never in public, right? That's an inside message. Once you're outside of the shell, so to speak, it's the U.S. Armed Forces, and that concept of this three musketeers, all for one and one for all, does not exist in our industry, and I don't get it, because there is so much power in that unified phalanx, right? I mean, the concept of the phalanx is a military concept, but it is the most powerful military invention going back to the Greeks, and it has never been penetrated. I mean, that is the definition of the most powerful military power, is the one that watches out for his neighbor, right? And we don't do that. So I think the last bit here is, again, again, going back to the idea that there are groups even on this this call, and it's a role that I've tried to take on for my little corner of the world, but to share the data with others, right? So that people can look at it and rely on it and say, actually, what they're doing down in Cypress Creek could work in Los Angeles. Where else could it work? Well, how do you know how it's going to work if you have no idea what's going on? So we have to be able to talk to each other. And so I think Art highlighted a powerful experiment here, which is, what if we all recognized, and social media is a fine place to do it, many of us are here on social, to talk about a topic, and take 2 weeks, take a week, hell, take 48 hours, it's probably good enough with the volume of messaging coming through, and everybody use the same kind of, the same hashtag, right? Pick a topic of the week, pick a topic of the day. I don't think it matters. We could do it on this group together. And if everybody relays their various perspectives, but it all comes back to the same topic, then we get to see that there is that constellation of perspectives, and that enriches us all because it's cross-populating, but we have the ability to find it. And that's something that I don't think we have right now. There was a group that came up, and I know Amy knows about this. She's in several of them with me. There was a group that sort of came up on Facebook around COVID and healthcare responders to COVID and sustaining for COVID, something along those lines. And one person invited like 35 people, and the next person invited 35 people. And all of a sudden, you have this conversation where everybody was unified around the idea that this was not talking about degrees. It was not talking about unions. It was not talking about any, it was talking about COVID. And it became a very rich conversation about ways of addressing a single common issue that everybody is threatened by. And I don't see any reason why we couldn't address the weakness of this cannibalistic messaging. I'll use sort of the strongest possible term I can think of, eating ourselves, by unifying around the idea that there are common messages here, there are varied responses to it, everybody's respectful of the fact that there are multiple flavors of, well, I don't think I want to use the word flavors and cannibalism at the same time, but that's another story for another time. But I think, you know, if we all recognize that we're all dealing with some of the same issues and we're dealing with it in different ways, but there is much to learn from each other. And so if you don't mind my sort of calling out to people, I'd love to have Art weigh in on this, and I'd love to have Mike Touchstone weigh in on this, because Mike was on the ground and has tried on many occasions to explain to me why there is some weird beef between the International Association of EMS Chiefs and the National EMS Management Association, which, by the way, have completely different organizational mandates. So the idea that they have some problem with each other seems very strange to me. But it seems to me they would be wonderfully served. And he's a person who's sort of is involved in both, who could talk about how they would be stronger as subgroups inside a broader organization than as individual groups whose members have this weird political affiliation one way or another. And clearly, again, by the chat, I know these folks have something to say, so I hope they'll speak up. Thank you guys for letting me ramble a little bit.
Yeah, I don't know if Art or Mike wants to go first, but I definitely like the idea of if we can find one value this week and maybe another value next week and one after that, and have that everybody here, whether you're fire EMS, whether you're private or you're publicly funded or however, that we could all come, because we all provide service, that we could come up with one value that we can all agree on. And maybe it is service. I don't know. Just the interesting thing, Mark Bashir is the chief down in Highland, Florida, was in PG. Their mission statement is one word: it's service. One word: service. Just think about that. Then they have their core values and principles of that. But yeah, who's going to go next? Is it going to be Art or Mike?
Well, since Art didn't say anything yet, I'll go ahead and
All right, go ahead.
start yapping. Well, to answer first Jonathan's query about the NEMSMA iChiefs thing, I was president of the National EMS Management Association, and I was also a charter member of the International Association of EMS Chiefs. And to me, it didn't make any sense that we should have two organizations that ostensibly represent the same constituents. And we worked really diligently for probably 3 years and spent a lot of money to try and bring those two organizations together. And it just didn't work. There was, I don't want to get into the whole underlying reasons behind it, because I really don't understand them myself. But I think it was individual hubris that really was the downfall. We do have a really, yeah.
Sorry, Mike, just my point being less about the reasons and more that, again, I'm trying to understand on behalf of anybody who cares about this, why isn't there imagine a group like this, right, where everybody is unified. We all know that everybody has self-selected to take time out of their day to be here, right? But clearly there are some people on this group who care more about finance, some who care about data, some who care about practice and safety and all that, and they all belong together. But they also have different areas of specialization, and why do there need to be so many overarching organizations where, and you said hubris, like there don't need to be so many kings of that castle. They can all be dukes, and we can group together and sort of realize that we can form a unified phalanx under which there are subgroups that represent their areas of specialization.
Well, there was and I think there still is, there's a group called the Joint National EMS Forum, and representatives of pretty much everybody that's somebody as a group in EMS get together periodically at conferences and so forth to talk about big issues. But a lot of it goes back to what I was talking about with wicked problems. We have conflicting stakeholders with conflicting concepts. NAEMT has one set of values and goals and mission. Registry is a completely separate entity. The educators, the physicians, the state officials, they all have different realms. And we try to pull that all together under a single umbrella, but nobody wants to sort of give up their turf, it seems like. There seems to be some divergent evolution has occurred. I don't understand it. Perhaps a group like this can start to bring people back together. I don't know. It's really, really confusing to me why people don't want to do things together, because the fire service clearly with the IAFC and the IAFF has a lot of influence and a lot of money, and we don't. We didn't get any money out of CARES 1, 2, or 3 so far that I'm aware of. It's directly directed towards EMS. Here's the thing, and the reason why I put the hashtag up, if we want to talk the talk and walk the walk, our value to start should be unity, because that's what we lack. And everybody on this call, I believe, would agree that that's something we really, really need to work towards. And we can be an example of people that have different perspectives and different ideas and are willing to sacrifice some of our own power, authority, jurisdiction to the greater good. So, I mean, as I said before, I can talk on this stuff all day long, but I think it's really critical for us to start thinking about ways to cross these divides, break down the silos and the stovepipes, and get people that are not just us at the table.
I like unity, and I'm just thinking, and I don't want to drag the saying out too long, but something like unity for service, unity in service, whatever. But both fire and EMS provide service, and we all need unity, both in our individual groups, IFF, IFC, in New Jersey, FMBA, Volunteer, Chiefs National Volunteer Council, NAMZ, NEMS, NAMT. You're right. We if we can find that one unifying value that would bring us together, that we will work towards. And I think that one of the things we should all look at in all those organizations, and obviously we're not representing them at the top levels right now, is we should think about, you don't need to give up any power. Let's just join together as a coalition. And having an Italian background, like in The Sopranos, the mafia always knows when the individual families are alone and when they come together to the table to meet to work together. And fire and EMS can do that, because we're all going to get hurt. EMS, I think, are going to get more, but we're all going to get hurt as we come out of this pandemic and the budgets start showing up, or the reduced income from service comes in, or whatever financially knocks us down. That we're better, and that's why I started this conversation. We're going to be better together moving forward. And if we take the hit together, we might find some innovative ways to collectively, improve our quality, not only improve our value, but show our value. And people want what we have, the services we provide. Just my thought.
Let me add one thing onto that, Tony. One of our commissioners, long gone, actually he's dead, and I didn't get along with him, but that's neither here nor there. His one comment is, our product is service.
Yeah.
We don't make anything. We provide service. So that fits right in with what you're saying.
Hey, Tony, I think going back to that hashtag of unity,
Right.
and trying to drive that unified message, throughout the week. I think we're looking for unity as having one single voice, whether it's unity and amongst services of your own jurisdiction,
Right.
supporting our staff. I mean, unity carries across all kinds of things that we do, and I think that's a great hashtag to try this week. So if we're sending messages out, regardless of the social media platform, let's tag that. Let's see what we can do to drive that message. There's a lot of people talking about, how the police department, the fire departments, fire services, that they control that media storm. Our new media delivery method is social media. The cop goes by all day long on Main Street. People are home right now. We have the ability to put that message on Main Street. That's social media. So, for a change, we actually have the ability to control a lot more messages than we ever did. And I think now is the time that we jump on and start to drive that message. It doesn't necessarily have to be the same message from everybody, but at least if we have that same core values, and I think that unity is probably that great starting point to drive that. Let's see what we can do with it for the week.
I like it. And if you actually look, Jonathan is man, that brain is, he's got a bunch of them. The one I like, and we should vote at the end, I like United We Serve. But that's just my opinion. You guys might like single word unity, united in service, but I mean, he's got a couple. We throw up a couple at the end of this. I agree. And look, we all, again, technically represent nobody, but we may be in groups that we have representative ability, and let's use it. And let's see how it flies in a week. And maybe this starts our opportunity by having that one hashtag word. My only question to all of you, do we just put that hashtag, or is there a little sentence that defines what it is, and an explainer as we go through?
I would say we don't have to define it, because that definition of unity has so many different variables, or when we're looking at, are we looking to unify the voice of EMS across the industry?
Right.
Are we looking to unify our voice within our community? Are we looking to unify with the other first responders within our community? Are we looking, so that I don't think it deserves a definition at this point, other than it is unity of, and I think what's trending right now is United We Serve, or that's what Jonathan's pushing at the moment. But,
Right.
That, that's it. Let it define itself.
Okay. I'm good with that. I mean, at the end of this, I think we just pick it and we throw it out there. Like I said, I totally believe that it will help us lead into next week's discussion. It'll start the thing for opportunities. Somebody in both, if we do this in Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, and I don't know what other mediums you all want to try, but if I think we throw it out down there and we start doing we check later to see how many people use it and what it's addressed to, it'll give us a different perspective on what kind of impact it's making. I like it. I love it. And that's why we get all these brains together here with all these thoughts and opinions. Who's next? Is there anybody up there next that wants to chat? There's a bunch of you that have been sitting on the sidelines. Anybody else's thoughts in here?
Tony, this is Terrence. I think that one of the things that we've kind of sort of touched on, but we need to really keep in mind, is that, too often, I think part of the, as Mike indicated, part of the challenge in forwarding our collective needs and ideas is that, you're right, personalities get in the way. And rather than promoting the doers and the dreamers that are going to move on, that are going to allow our industry to professionalize and move on and to achieve its potential, we need to empower those folks, not necessarily the ones with the most shirt jewelry or the biggest name or the most meeting invitations. And we need to ensure that we're bringing up the next generation. Succession planning is often the failure of many organizations. And it seems that the only thing that we train our successive leaders to do is to keep on doing the same thing. And if we keep on doing the same thing, we're going to be gone.
Amen. And it's on both sides of the fence, fire and EMS. Police department and the military seem to do a much better job at it for multiple reasons. I agree. So let's, this is just part of it. You're all empowered to take United for Service and be part of this discussion and add others to the discussion and take the messages out that, hey, here's the conversation we need to have, and feel comfortable that you have people, at least what I got right now. We still have 25 left, still 25 people, and we had 30 something at the top that support this message. And I believe if we continue to do that, more people will engage in this conversation and start to share that message. And maybe, as Mike said, we can come back, and sit at the table with the other people we need to sit at the table with. Right now, the IFC is putting out they put out an emergency message yesterday about pushing for funding for fire, for fire and fire EMS through federal legislation. If they, and I know Gary and all the people in IFC, but if they were smart enough to say, hey, look, EMS, you guys need money too. How can we help you? How can we work together? Let's all push. And instead of having, say, 1,000 groups, promoting it, you have 2,000 groups and a stronger voice. But right now we got to start small with a hashtag word, and I think that will get us to go. Alan Shaw says, United We Serve has been used many times. So I like United We Serve, but maybe let's do something like, let's use United for Service or Unity in Service. Look at somebody, do a search on them, Unity in Service, and see if how much that's used. If not, for the guys who know, we Live on the Lake is not used much. But let's do that. I like that. Who else do we have up? Anybody? United for You, Joseph Scotty's got. Who's next?
I'll take a quick jump in real quick. I'm not going to be long as I was the first time, but what I was thinking, and I saw, I think it was Alan that had said, how do we prove our value? Like, how do we show our value? And I know, Tony, you had said, that there's going to be pain coming towards the EMS and fire world, especially, and we've seen it. I've seen it. There's layoffs in the private industry right now for EMS, a significant amount of layoffs, and even spanning into the hospital-based systems because of the call volume reduction and things like that. You're seeing these reductions. I mean, from a fire-based perspective, I don't have that opinion. All I can assume call volume is probably still the same, even more so with people being at home, CO detectors.
Actually, it's not, Nick. Fires like EMS. Call volume
really
in the hot areas is down for a lot of places, 20 to 40%.
Wow. So the one perspective that I can offer, one I know I touched on it, last week, is branding yourself and marketing yourself and putting yourself out there as a business and leveraging your social media, your community outreach and things like that. But what I'm going to do over the next week is I'm going to put together just a short little thing, and I'll share it into the group once I have it done. Just some different perspectives and ideas on how you can justify your value in the community. What are some business ideals, looking at the community-based practice, looking at, getting out there and doing community outreach, even in a time where you have to socially distance. What can we do to impact that? I'm gonna look at that a little bit more holistically and see if I can come up with some sort of either flow sheet or a chart or something that can give some better ideas to show that marketing and kind of justify that value a little bit more for the services. So stay tuned with that, but I just wanted to drop that opinion that there are many ways that you can prove your value. It's just a matter of leveraging, one, what you have existing, and two, taking that, and I say it a lot, that agnostic approach, taking that step out of your current beliefs and taking your step out of those traditional beliefs and looking at what we can do different to influence our business lines and our services. So I'll take a look at that this week, and I'll have something for next week's discussion that I can share out to everybody.
It sounds good. I think we're getting close unless somebody has something to start wrapping up. But here, some perspectives I get, we'll get the whole list out of what we've done for threats and weaknesses and the stuff that I added based on your comments today, and look at them and see how we're going to take these weaknesses and turn these obstacles into opportunities to take these issues and roadblocks and turn them into solutions, because that's the key, and then how to do that in a reasonable way. I think it's real easy to present what our opportunities are. The hard part is the process, and as Mike said earlier, part of strategic, we should have set up values and had that, but this is kind of a loose fitting process, so I didn't. But the real hard part, the real work is how are we going to turn what we think are opportunities into true opportunities? What work is it? And we may have people on here like you're doing, Nick, that says, look, I'll take this process, this opportunity, and work on it. I'll work on this one, or collectively we do this. I think that's definitely the direction we got to go in, is to look at not only the opportunities, but how do we make them work. And if you've never read the book Tribal Leadership, which I believe we're really doing here, is stage 4 and stage 5 tribes are aligned on strategic values for a noble cause. And what happens is there's more collective sharing of thoughts and ideas and the workload, so more gets done. And I think everybody I've seen on here has that mind thing. I'm starting to get overdone, but that thought process and that attitude. So align for a higher purpose. Put them all out. Put them in. Jonathan, put them all out in an email to everybody. Let's make sure we have everybody's email again. I don't know if I got some from the first week, but there's no reason why we shouldn't have all this contact information for next time. So anybody else before we wrap this up? And if we're going to wrap it up, the couple things we're going to do, we're looking for the hashtag. We're finishing up what we have for our weaknesses. And next week, we're going to come into this with the opportunities that we know we're going to have to work on. And I have a little starting list. If you guys have anything, send it to Jonathan or me, and I'll add it to the list. And what I will try to do, no purpose, and Jonathan has 18 pages of transcript for this. It's cool. So what I will try to do with Jonathan, Nick, or whoever help is get out some ticklers on opportunities ahead of time, so we come into this with and be working next week. Thoughts, ideas that work for you all, either verbally or comment?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
sounds good.
Anybody else have anything to add?
You're changing the world, brother. One conference call at a time.
If not, we're at least getting out and just being able to vet and get our expound on our beliefs and thoughts, and somebody's listening, right? Well, I'll leave you all with that. We're down to 18 anyway. You'll have a good rest of the Friday. For you guys that don't know, Mike Touchstone might know. In Philadelphia, one of the radio stations, WXPN, has Funky Friday. So from 4 to 7, I'll be down with my wife, having a drink, dancing in the maybe outside today if the rain stays up, and burning off some of the negative energy. So you all have a great day, and we're out of here. Jonathan, I'll stay on long enough to make sure we have the notes. I think we have them all.
I'm good, Tony.
All right. All right, got
I
it.
didn't know. I just realized I was on mute as I was saying goodbye to everybody.
All right. All right. I'm going to close this out. Hopefully we have all the notes. If not, everybody can add a little bit.
You got it.
Y'all have a great day. We're out of
Have
here.
a great weekend. Thanks, guys.